And welcome back to the Schlocky Horror Picture Show. I hope you're enjoying the Double D Avenger as much as we are in the studio. I'll talk about our feature presentation soon, but first I have waiting on the line Mr. Ralph Baker, who played horror host Deadly Ernest in Melbourne from 1967 to 1972. Mr. Baker, are you there? Hello?
Yes.
Thank you for joining me here tonight on the Schlocky Horror Picture Show. Now, the first obvious question is, how exactly did the character of Deadly Ernest come about?
Deadly Ernest came about because the O10 network had bought a package of films. They were all B-grade horror films, and they didn't know what to do with them. And I believe it was Ian Bannerman in Sydney who came up with the idea of having a horror host and then presenting these as horror movies. So he was actually the first Deadly Ernest in Sydney, and all the other channels throughout the O10 network decided to follow suit. So there was almost one in every state. Brisbane had one. We started one in Melbourne. There was one in Adelaide, and I think the Adelaide one also covered Perth.
If I may interrupt there, sir.
They asked me if I'd like to do it. Showed me footage of Ian Bannerman's work in Sydney, and then we set about writing and producing our own version. We went to wardrobe and messed about with the clothes and coming up with the costume that I wore, which was the top hat, like a sort of an 18th century funeral director's hat with a ribbon tied round it, and a frock coat.
Yes, yeah, if I could just...
A big exaggerated bow tie and so on.
I'm sorry,
but
hang
the
on.
fact that each state did their own version meant that they were all quite different. They all looked different, and they all went about it in a different way. So that's about how it happened.
I believe you made a lot of public appearances too. I don't go out much myself. I'm quite the homebody, you might say. A slight dog problem.
Yes, I did quite a lot of personal appearances, which at first took us quite by surprise because we had no idea that the character was going to be so popular. And when people started contacting the station and saying, oh, look, we've got something on, we'd like to have Deadly Ernest make an appearance, we had to start following them up and doing these personal appearances. I would generally get made up and dressed at the studio, and then from there we would drive to wherever the venue was. Well, across Melbourne it might be an hour away before you got there, and here we were driving through suburban streets, city streets, with me in full makeup and full kit, and I got some very funny looks at stoplights at times. People just, as they do at stoplights, just sort of looking around, they'd suddenly see you and, that's Deadly! And we got all sorts of funny reactions. One of the funniest ones that I did, fortunately it wasn't very far from the channel, and it was a football match, believe it or not, between the cast of Hair and the Channel 10 boys, or Channel O boys as it was then. And I was going to make an appearance at the match. They got hold of an old 1924 hearse and put my coffin in the back of the hearse, and he said, right, well, you can hop in the car, and just before we get there, we'll open the back and you can get in the coffin. Well, we found that didn't work because as soon as you put the coffin inside the hearse, there wasn't enough room to open the lid. So the only thing I could do was hop in the coffin, then they put the coffin in the hearse, and I actually drove to the football match in the coffin. Not many of you can say that you've driven around in your own coffin, I'm sure. But we arrived there, they unloaded the coffin out of the hearse, and I popped out of the coffin. So it was something quite different.
Oh, welcome to my world. Lucky you're not claustrophobic.
Normally I am, but it didn't seem to bother me. I could hold the lid up a bit so I could breathe and so on. It didn't worry me, or perhaps I've just become more paranoid in my older years or something.
One of the problems with working for community television is that I have to do my own makeup. Did you ever have that problem?
In appearances in later years, and I have done some since he finished on television, my daughter has done a makeup course, and she's able to do it. My wife has been able to do it, so we've managed to get by. But generally, as I say, we went to the studio and did all makeup and getting dressed there, and then just shocked the motorists on the road as we went.
Did Deadly Ernest ever get fan mail saying what a complete bastard he was? I get those sorts of letters all the time, which is better than nothing, I suppose.
Well, people would write and say that, and we took it as a compliment, of course. It's what I was supposed to be. So it was very hard to know in that case if they were really meaning to be nasty or if in their nastiness they were being complimentary. We just took it that they were complimentary, and that was that. And because of the number of fan letters, which again was something that took us by surprise, I didn't really have to write very much of a script each week, because the fan letters gave it to me. They'd write poems and all sorts of things that I was able to read and to use on air. So they actually made my job easier, which was good.
I wish I had a writer. Anyway, I happen to know that Deadly Ernest is not the only character you've played on television. What other skeletons have you got in your closet?
I did do a bit in the Magic Circle Club once as another character, just a small character in part of their show. And I also stood in once for Fifi Bear in the Magic Circle Club. Fifi Bear, who was played by John Michaelhausen. And of course, was in a bear costume, and you couldn't tell who was in the costume anyway. So I did actually stand in for him once because he had to dash off somewhere. I made a few very minor appearances in my earlier days in television on In Melbourne Tonight during comedy sketches with Graham Kennedy. The only other thing that I remember making appearance again was on In Melbourne Tonight. Was my 21st birthday. I actually was in Melbourne Tonight, and they sang happy birthday to me on the show. So that was something memorable too.
Getting back to Deadly Ernest, how was the name chosen?
Well, we didn't have to choose the name. It came to us already saying, look, we want to do this character called Deadly Ernest. And we looked at the spelling of it, where Ernest was spelt E-A-R-N-E-S-T. And it was a nice play on words that we could use, and it became Deadly's signature line that he'd say, when I say that this movie is awful, I'm Deadly Ernest. And that became his signature line each week, really, introducing the movies.
Were there any Jekyll and Hyde problems separating the character from your own real life? For instance, whenever I visit the doctor's office, I have to resist the urge to stand still in the corner.
I'd walk into the makeup room as Ralph Baker, sit down in the makeup chair, and an hour later I'd emerge as Deadly Ernest. And there really was a change that took place. As Deadly, I did things that I would never do as myself. One perfect example was hosting a horror movie night at a local movie theatre. And I was sitting on the stage talking with the audience, and somebody placed a Hessian bag on the stage beside me and said, "That's for you, Deadly." I didn't know what was in the bag, but I took one look at the bag and I guessed that there was a snake in there. And sure enough, there was. But as Deadly, I just opened the bag, stuck my hand in there and pulled the snake out. Now, I would never do that. Snakes are not my thing. But as Deadly, I just did it without a second thought. I was handed a dead rat another time at a university function that I attended. All sorts of things that I just took in my stride as Deadly. It would absolutely horrify me as Ralph Baker.
As regular viewers already know, we do our show live and direct every Friday night. Was your show pre-recorded at all, or did it go straight to air?
No, it didn't go straight to air. We used to tape a fortnight at a time. So we'd tape on I think it was a Friday afternoon, and we'd do that Fridays and the next Fridays, so that one would go to air that night, the other one the following week, and then we would tape again. So, but everything that was taped went to air. Sometimes, with as far as the management were concerned, disastrous results. There was one occasion when Deadly had, I think it was a copy of TV Times, and he was looking through the TV Times to see what was on at the same time slot, and said, "Oh, there's really nothing worth watching." It's, "Oh, what's the? Oh, on Channel 2, there's the tennis. The tennis is on Channel 2. I don't know why you're watching me. You should be watching the tennis." And evidently the next day, the general manager had a phone call from a friend of his who said, "Very grateful to that host of yours. I'd forgotten all about the tennis and he reminded me." The general manager wasn't actually very impressed. "You don't spend your time recommending people watch the other channel." And as a joke, fortunately, when I went to collect my pay that week, there wasn't any. He told the paymaster, "Take Ralph's envelope out and we'll tell him he's not getting paid." They did come good, fortunately, but that was his little joke to get back at me.
For the last 3 decades, I understand you've still been treading the boards, so to speak, with your very own puppet theatre. Puppets are a little old-fashioned. Care to explain yourself?
My theatre's called the Pinnacle Puppet Theatre, and that began originally by a friend asking me to do a show for an event she was organising. So I made the whole show and put it all together, and have just carried it on ever since. My wife and I have recently finished a 5-month journey with a caravan on the back of the car, touring around basically the western half of Australia, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And we want to take 12 months and go around Australia with a caravan and take the puppet show with us and do puppet shows on the way. I think it'd be a great experience.
Now that's my idea of entertainment. Little things hitting each other. Oh, my producer's either giving me the wind-up signal or he's demonstrating how to pleasure a very large lady. Do you have any final comments concerning your time with Deadly Ernest before we wrap up this interview?
Deadly was a fun character to play because he could play things in reverse to the normal. So if Deadly said something was horrible, you knew that it was really quite good. You always could take the opposite with him. And he also had the ability, because of the sort of character he was, of being able to tell the truth, which many other television presenters of that day were quite jealous of, because Deadly could say, "Look, I don't know why you want to watch this movie. It's absolutely dreadful," which was absolutely true. Other hosts couldn't do that. They had to build up their programs and say, "Oh, this is a wonderful program. I'm sure you'll enjoy it thoroughly." And they'd say to me, "Oh, I wish I could tell the truth the way you do." So that was a side of Deadly that was fun. I had great fun doing it over the years. I guess the thing where we missed out a little bit in those days, these days would be different. We didn't have the merchandising to follow up on it. Oh, who knows? I could have made a lot of money.
Yes, fine. Shut up. I'm deeply sorry to interrupt you there, Mr. Baker, but my producer is definitely giving me the wind-up, and if I try to ignore him, he hits me with a ruler. I'm sure you understand. You've worked in television. Thank you again, Mr. Baker. Now, back to tonight's television premiere presentation. The Double D Avenger is the brainchild of my good friend and party animal, Bill Winkler, a writer-producer in Hollywood who got tired of pitching movies to studios and decided to pitch them to the wind instead. One day he just took all his money out of the bank, pulled 3 of Russ Meyer's bosom buddies out of retirement, and built a movie around them that would be pretty much based on the concept that if the breasts are big enough, they will come. Kitten Natividad, possessor of the 2 most famous breasts in the Western world, is the Double D Avenger, tossing off knocker jokes faster than the late great Benny Hill. Kitten's extraordinary talents could be seen not only in Russ Meyer's Up and Beneath the Valley of the Ultra Vixens, but also in more legitimate films such as The New Centurions, My Tutor, Another 48 Hours, and both Flying High films. That's Airplane to you damned Yankees out there. Not so legitimate films include John Holmes and the All-Star Sex Queens, Deep Jaws, Let's Talk Sex, Take It Off, Bodacious Tartars, Thanks for the Memories, Zombie Ninja Gangbangers, Fresh Tits of Bel Air, Titillation 3, Big Busty 3, Wild Wild Chest 3, Electric Blue 11, and The New Adventures of Bean Baxter. Joining Kitten are Raven Delacroix, also from Russ Meyer's Up, and Haji, who starred in the classic cult films Faster Pussycat Kill Kill, Motorpsycho, Beneath the Valley of the Ultra Vixens, and Ilsa, Harem Keeper of the Oil Sheiks. The Double D Avengers' arch-enemies, Hydra Heifer, Pirate Jugs and Ooga Boobies, haven't counted on Kitten's double whoppers, which allow her to dispatch the stripper squad with the kind of booby traps not seen since Chesty Morgan starred in Deadly Weapons. I'm sure that's more than enough information, and the last thing I want to do is get between you and an enormous pair of breasts. So let's get straight back to the Double D Avenger.